Well, let's cross live to Chicago now and speak with our international correspondent, Faith Orr. Faith, well, good to see you now. Can you provide more context on the emotional and powerful speech that President Biden delivered to open the convention?
Absolutely. President Joe Biden was the headline speaker last night. He was introduced by his daughter, and when he came on stage, he did have to wipe away a few tears as he was hugging her. We saw everyone chanting, "We love you, Joe." We saw lots of signs about loving him. Kamala Harris herself getting a bit emotional, as well as Nancy Pelosi. It was really a heartfelt goodbye from the 81-year-old president. So the convention centre very much rallying behind him to say farewell. I think much more so than actually he had a much warmer reception than he would have had he still been the party's nominee, because of course that's how quickly things can change in US politics. He would not have been quite so warmly received, I don't think. I think we would have seen a lot more, not unrest, but a lot more controversy around his appearance. He did give a very good speech, not just reflecting on the past few years and handing over to Harris, but of course using it to attack Trump. He was quite powerful. He called him a liar. He said he was deceitful. He was bad for America. Joe Biden was on good form last night, and actually, had he been on that form earlier in the campaign, there probably wouldn't have been so many calls for him to go.
All right, Faith, Biden also paid tribute to his Vice President Kamala Harris. What can you tell us about the significance of that gesture and the party's formal endorsement of her as the 2024 presidential nominee?
Absolutely. I mean, he described her as a very close friend. He spoke very warmly of the years working together, said it had been a great relationship, and he thought that America would be in good hands. He's ceremoniously handing over the torch, of course. So a very good relationship between the two of them present on stage last night. Kamala Harris spoke herself. She said, she thanked him for his historic legacy, for all of the work that he'd done for America. She said, "We love you, Joe. Thank you, Joe." So very clearly, very close relationship between the two of them. Unlike what Trump is insinuating, of course, in that she pushed him out. So saw no signs of that last night. There were some protests, but generally it was a warm reception.
So with Biden focusing on the battle for the soul of America, how is the party framing the stakes and urgency of this election in their messaging so far?
We know that the polls are actually narrowing between the candidates. Harris leading by a couple of points, but the problem there is, of course, that that's a national average. Depends which poll you listen to, these things change, these numbers change. The problem as well is that voters are still saying that they trust the Republican Party more on issues like the economy, jobs, housing, whereas the Democrats only really lead when it comes to healthcare. So that is something that Harris will be thinking about, but the key message that we heard last night is that it's all about the momentum of this convention. They want to end the week strong, and they want to carry that on when Harris is announcing new policies. They want to keep up the enthusiasm that they're hoping to stir up here in Chicago.
And Faith, how does this opening day set the stage for the remainder of the four-day convention? What key events, speeches, and even themes will you watch over the next few days?
Well, as you can see behind me, things are going to be getting underway soon. People are here. We expect tonight we're going to hear from Bernie Sanders, we're going to hear from Chuck Schumer, we're also going to hear from Stephanie Grisham, who was Trump's former press secretary, so she's an interesting addition to the lineup tonight. And then we are going to get into the real big names. We're going to hear from Michelle Obama, and the headline speaker tonight, former President Barack Obama. This is Chicago. They will get a good reception in this city.
And based on Biden's remarks and the party's positioning, what are the main dividing lines emerging between the Democrats and Republicans heading into the general election campaign?
I mean, the economy is a big issue. We spoke about this a lot. A lot of people are talking about the price of food, for instance. But there's also immigration. I mean, Trump pushes a lot of things, a lot of I don't want to use the word lies, but there are untruths that he says about immigration. They are divided on quite a lot of issues. Of course, the supporters of both parties are going to stick with those parties. The key for both sides is to try and persuade the undecideds to come to their side. Democrats seem to be slightly better at doing that than the Republicans. I mean, when we hear speeches from Kamala Harris, she's urging unity. She's trying to rally people around the Democratic Party, whereas Trump's speeches are obviously a bit more divisive. He tends to speak more to his base. So I think it will be key to see where the undecideds go, and it will also be key to see what happens when the two debate later on in the year.
And Faith, before I let you go, we understand that there's been a little security concern as the police arrested about 13 people who breached the perimeter fence. Let us in on what more you are following on that.
Absolutely, we were actually there for that, myself and our cameraman Ivica. So we were in the park. It had been at the end of a protest route. Some protesters had stayed behind. They'd breached parts of panels of fencing, which was, I mean, it was nowhere near the centre really. It was quite a distance away, but some people did get through. They were arrested. And then others were pushed back. So the police, they stayed in a line for a while. They let the protesters stay in that park, and then eventually they formed a huge line and they pushed everyone back. There was one point where it got a little hairy because as the police were pushing everyone back, I was with some of the last protesters there. We ended up against a barrier. The police didn't realise the barrier was there and were particularly unhappy that we all stopped moving back. And it was because, well, we couldn't get any further. Police were all dressed in riot gear. Many of them had their badge numbers covered. And that is something that the protesters say is a breach of their rights. The police should be identifiable. They call it an intimidation tactic. But that park was cleared. We also saw in Union Park they had set up some tents. They were trying to set up a camp there. The police were not having that. They cleared those tents. They have been preparing for this event for a long time. They're not going to let protesters disrupt it.
Well, Faith Orr, I'd like to thank you for your time. Thank you, and you stay safe. Faith Orr, our international correspondent live there in Chicago.